In 1982, while living and working in New Rochelle, New York, I received a letter from the Little Rock Central High School class of 1962 inviting me to attend the 20th high school reunion. I was startled, to say the least. Never during the 20 years since my graduation from that school had I been invited to participate in any of the class reunions. And just as important, there had never been any desire on my part to set foot in that school again or to see any of my classmates. Yet I called my parents and said, I cannot imagine what this is about, but I'm going to come home and attend one activity banquet, and I want you to join me because during my 3 years at Little Rock Central, you were not permitted to come into the school. And so this will give you an opportunity to have a sense of the people that I went to school with. In September 1969, I became one of 3 students who began attending Little Rock Central High School. We began 1 month after the 2 members of the Little Rock Nine had been readmitted, and therefore there were 5 black students who were going to attend and begin the desegregation process over again. On the morning that we began school in September 1959, my dad stayed home from work that morning to have breakfast, and after breakfast he prayed, and he reminded me that the Lord was my shepherd and that I should not be fearful. But also my parents just gently coached me about how they thought I should approach the day. That morning we didn't talk as we drove because we were all very apprehensive. Not afraid, but we just didn't know what was going to happen. And when we got to the school, there was nobody outside, which is so different from what happened in 1957. But when we looked over to the stately staircase that we needed to walk up, there were members of the Arkansas National Guard standing on every step, top to bottom. As we walked, I saw the guardsmen, and as I walked past the guardsmen, I thought, are they going to have to come into the school to rescue me? And it frazzled me to think of that. We go into the building, there's nobody in the building, in the hallways, because everybody went to class so that we would not come in a flurry of students moving in the hallway. After meeting the principal, the assistant principal worked with us, told us that she was our point person, and she was, and she walked us to our homerooms. On my way to my homeroom, which was in the northern part of the first floor, I noted where there was a door. It was important for me to know that if I needed to leave the school, that I could get out a door. I was introduced to my homeroom teacher, and she was very cool. And I thought, She pointed me to my seat, did not introduce me to the class. People in the class looked at me, looked away, and one boy who always was harassing to me started quietly mumbling. When we got ready to go to our first class, I really was apprehensive. I was 15 years old. I was the youngest of the 5 students who were attending Central who were black, and I had been placed in the 10th grade by myself, so I didn't have another black classmate to support me. The bell rang, I went into the hallway, and I started walking, and I heard an echoing, the nigger is coming, a nigger is coming. And people parted like the waters parted when the people were leaving Egypt. And there was this pathway down the middle of the hallway that I walked alone. And I remembered as I was walking that my parents said, look straight ahead, hold your head high, but sense what's going on around you. During those 3 years, not more than 2 people ever spoke to me. No one in my homeroom ever looked at me or spoke to me, except when it was my turn to read the Bible. Each time I was called upon to read the Bible, I read the 121st Psalm as a witness to my classmates of what was sustaining me. I will look to the hills from whence cometh my strength, and my strength comes from the Lord. I never, ever read any verse other than that because that was sustaining me. I was by myself during those 3 years, and awful things didn't happen to me that people might have predicted, like being shoved, kicked, spit upon. I was spat upon in my face. I was kicked once, but the prevailing atmosphere was to treat me as if I did not matter, that I did not exist. And my parents and my grandfather, whom we lived with, were very clear that I should not take personally what was happening to me because I was representative of my race and I was there representing my race. And my mother said, if people could know you, they would come to love you. But the circumstances are that they will never know you. By the time we got to spring of 1962, the graduation, I was absolutely almost clicking my heels and about to go off to Kansas. Graduation was so strange. Only our parents could attend. Quigley Stadium, which is the massive football stadium at Central High School, was ringed by police. And I had never been in Quigley Stadium before because by law, none of the black students could attend any sporting activities, could not be on any sports teams, could not be involved in any clubs and organizations, could not receive any honors if they were done well at graduation. My class graduated 554 students. From day one until the end, I was the only black student in that class. As I went to receive my diploma, I smiled sweetly, knowing that this was the end and also the beginning of the rest of my life. And some guy yelled, "There goes Black Beauty." And what I thought was, this is it. Alone and insulted from beginning to end. All around me, my classmates were talking about who they were going to miss, and there was just so much. I sat there thinking, I'm not going to miss anybody. I am just so grateful to still be sane and alive. But most of all, I really dislike young people because I had been treated so cruelly. So going back to the scene of the crime was an experience that I never thought I would want. I am so glad that my parents and I went to that reunion because we arrived, and what I learned is that one young man in my class who had been in my homeroom and never spoke to me had been responsible for my being invited to the reunion. He had returned from Vietnam. He was taking classes in Chicago, and they read The Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. And in the course of that study, he said he came to understand that I had been made invisible. And he was very ashamed of himself. And he promised himself that in some way that he would want to make a difference in my life. And in 1982, it was to get his classmates to agree that I should get an invitation to the 20th reunion. But when my parents and I arrived for the banquet, he met us at the door and indicated that nobody else in the class felt comfortable and didn't want to sit with us. And so we would be seated at a table alone. And he said, I am joining you because I want you to know that I'm going to work for the rest of my life to make sure that you are not invisible. The really outstanding lesson that I learned that evening was about the power of one person to do the right thing, because many of my classmates came over during the course of the evening to talk to me, to introduce themselves to me, to say to me that they really admired what I had done. They were sorry for what had happened, but there were any number of things that happened, and there were things that I received from them 20 years later that I never expected to receive. You can legislate things through laws, but the most important things that have to be legislated are things of the heart. and God is involved in the hard things, and that it is indeed a blessing that I have had this kind of closure in my life. And I have learned that not everybody is still locked into that place. And what I also will say, it was the grace of God. It was the faith of my fathers, of my mothers. It was the grace of God and all the things that I learned as a young girl on my Christian journey that sustained me every day, so that I had hope, that I had the strength, I had the grit to go to the end, and I had the faith that what I was doing would be important, even though people don't know my name and people did not even know that there was anybody in that school other than the Little Rock Nine. But we must soldier on. The fight is not over, but much has been done, and I am blessed to have been a little part of what has happened for my people.